Today we're talking about lower body miscellaneous. These are things that didn't fall into our main categories, much like the upper body miscellaneous. We're just getting a few finer details in, some more isolated movements that might have very specific purposes. They're not quite important enough to get into our main categories, but they're still worth knowing about. And here I'm demonstrating a hip thrust or glute bridge. We went over these a little bit in our hip hinge pattern video, but it's worth repeating. This is a really important pattern. Most people have weak hip flexors, tight hip flexors, and very weak inactive glutes, and this is a good way to address that. This one's called tabletop. I'm about to demonstrate. First, I made sure my shoulders were in place. I retracted and depressed them before pressing my hips up towards the ceiling. And I'm raising and lowering the hips there, opening up for the shoulder. I'm not allowing the shoulders to protract there. I'm keeping them retracted so my chest opens up. Otherwise, it's a lot of pressure through the front of the shoulder joint. Here I'm demonstrating a little gentle sissy squat, where I lift up onto the balls of my feet and I push my knees forward. This can be useful for conditioning the knees for a bit of extra stress. I would use this probably in place of a leg extension, which you might see in a traditional bodybuilding program. I'll attempt to demonstrate some breathing Hindu squats. The breathing here is kind of counterintuitive actually. You'll often breathe in on the way down, out on the way up, or vice versa. Hamstring curls. I'm demonstrating with a cable machine because we don't have a hamstring curl machine at this gym. It's a little compromised, but you get the idea. This is another isolated movement that can be handy, and you might as well couple it with the knee extension. This is training some knee flexion through a nice full range, hopefully. Here's another way to work that knee flexion. If you happen to have it set to TRX and you want to show off your calves for a pretty video, you can use that. I'm trying to keep my hips extended so it's basically a straight line between my knees and my shoulders for that one. And you can perform the same movement if you want to work knee flexion on a Swiss ball, like so. Now, a lot of people poo-poo the Swiss ball. I'm a huge fan of barbells. I'm a huge fan of lifts that might be called hardcore, but I'm not going to leave out a tool if it can be perfectly useful. And sometimes people need to train a little bit of knee flexion, so it's a useful tool for that. Alrighty. Quick pickup because I had smashed my ankle right before we filmed this originally in January. This is a squat jump from the front. And from the side. And a split squat jump. From the side. There we go. Back extensions. These ones are great. Should actually be called hip extension. Doesn't really matter where you place the arms. Great for developing the posterior chain, so it's a bit of work for the glutes, hamstrings, and your lower back. You can relax a little bit in terms of the neutral spine at the bottom there. This one's a stiff-legged deadlift. So you can see I'm not bending the knees as much as I would for a regular deadlift. It's almost exactly the same as this pattern, which is a good morning. These are pretty pure hinges, which we played with before as a precursor to the deadlift. Since this category is kind of more of accessories, there's something else that belongs in here. Donkey calf raises. This is a standard normally performed with two pretty girls in bikinis straddling your back, back in the 60s if you were part of the golden age of bodybuilding. Otherwise, it's just a really deep, intense stretch and obviously a workout for your calves. We can do standing calf raises, a little bit of balance involved there. If you can do 15 of these with a pause at the top each time, then physiotherapists say you're ready to start running. So notice I've rolled my ankle here. I'm going to demonstrate how to get it moving gently after an injury like that, or actually have some motion in the first place, which will help you avoid some injuries. Doing some circles through the ankles. Ow! These kind of movements can be good for just loosening things up, getting them prepared for maybe not being in perfect alignment all the time. Perhaps you're not always going to be in a neat balanced position with a perfect barbell on your back, and you'd like to have joints that can actually lean sideways occasionally. Keep in mind, guys, as I said after our upper body miscellaneous video, that these are accessories. They are a bit of an addendum to our really important movements. They can just help fill in little gaps around the edges. You don't want to make them the central focus of your training program. Realistically, the majority of what you're doing in the gym shouldn't really look like trying to balance a plate on your head and do pigeon-based dancing exercises.